What would you make of an interstellar object quivering so intensely that telescopes recorded a pulse every 147 seconds, as though something inside were forcing its escape? That is exactly what 3I Atlas is doing at this very moment. Its spin remains unnaturally precise, even as waves of tremors ripple through its body, and the pulses align with the direction of the old WOW signal. Avi Loeb has cautioned that the pattern appears far too exact to ignore, and each new quake drives the enigma closer to a critical threshold. The earliest indications that something was gravely amiss with 3I Atlas came when telescopes detected a peculiar internal vibration repeating in a clear rhythm, at a distance where interstellar travelers usually remain inert and silent. This object began shuddering in short, propagating waves, as if pressure were building from within. The tremors did not resemble natural cracking or ordinary stress. They followed a strict cadence that mirrored the radio pulses arriving every 147 seconds. These pulses traveled along band signals that seemed to originate from the same direction as the object, suggesting the shaking and the radio bursts were part of a single phenomenon. Observers also noted that its rotation stayed unnaturally steady during each tremor. Most interstellar objects tilt or wobble under stress, but 3I Atlas moved like a perfectly aimed projectile. No flicker of light, no change in angle, no indication that the violent shaking was disturbing its spin. That consistency raised deeper concern, hinting at some inner mechanism maintaining balance while something inside pressed outward. Avi Loeb analyzed the pattern carefully, noting that 3I Atlas's path aligns closely with the region associated with the 1977 WOW signal. The overlap could be coincidental, yet the matching direction and repeating pulse cycle demanded scrutiny. The object did not act like a typical deep space fragment. It behaved as if carrying a process inconsistent with known physics. With each cycle, the shaking intensified, suggesting rising internal pressure pushing towards something previously unseen. As 3I Atlas drew nearer, the internal tremors grew stronger, and radio telescopes detected an even more unsettling phenomenon. A low-band electromagnetic pulse repeated in a precise rhythm every 147 seconds, unwavering by even the slightest fraction. This timing matched the internal shaking recorded via brightness variations, linking the vibrations directly to the signal. Natural bodies do not pulse in such a consistent manner. They crack, flare, or react to heat and pressure, but they do not emit perfectly timed bursts that persist over days. The pulse's regularity suggested a mechanical or systematic origin rather than a chemical one. Some stations reported hints of structured sequences, with early interpretations pointing to patterns resembling mathematical progressions. Though debated, claims circulated that the radio bursts contained shifts similar to prime number spacing or early Fibonacci intervals. Avi Loeb emphasized another critical detail. The pulse's direction closely matched the region from which the WOW signal originated decades ago. That signal was a solitary, unexplained burst, never confirmed. The arrival of 3I Atlas from a similar direction gave these new pulses extraordinary significance. The object's shaking and the radio bursts appeared interconnected, as though both were expressions of a deeper internal process. Throughout this activity, 3I Atlas's rotation remained perfectly steady. No wobble, no tilt, no hint that the tremors affected its spin. Its rotation was so flawlessly stable that it defied natural expectation. Interstellar objects almost always wobble. Their irregular surfaces crack as they warm, and rotation shifts under stress. Yet 3I Atlas moved in a straight line with a rotation that seemed engineered rather than coincidental. Brightness variations were minimal, showing no tilt or drift. As the shaking escalated, this stability became even more concerning. Any natural object under comparable internal stress would lurch uncontrollably. Instead, this one maintained equilibrium while its interior quivered with increasing force. The contrast suggested a deliberate balance, as though its outer shell were designed to remain centered despite internal upheaval. Avi Loeb observed that highly stable rotation paired with internal vibration is exceedingly rare in nature, resembling controlled stabilization, an alignment maintained while inner mechanisms operate. When combined with the repeated 147-second pulses and violent tremors, the behavior defied classification. Nothing about it matched the model of a comet or asteroid. The stable rotation also influenced its trajectory. Without wobble to disperse force unevenly, each internal tremor nudged the object in the same direction. These small impulses accumulated, gradually shifting its path toward the inner system. The shaking continued to intensify. The pulses remained constant, and all the while, 3I Atlas spun like a perfectly balanced device, moving with apparent intention rather than randomness. The tremors did more than create internal stress. They began altering the object's motion. Normally, interstellar visitors follow steady, gravity-driven paths. But as 3I Atlas's vibrations intensified, its trajectory shifted subtly, yet consistently. Each tremor caused a slight deviation, synchronized with the 147-second pulse, implying that the shaking drove the directional changes. The object's rotation remained unwavering, so every internal push acted in the same orientation, guiding it along a surprisingly coherent path. Frozen objects do not self-correct or respond repeatedly to internal forces. Yet 3I Atlas behaved as if each quake nudged it along a preordained line. As the shaking escalated, the drift became more evident, bending the path gradually toward the inner system and confounding modeling efforts. Each recalculation was quickly outdated by the next pulse. The motion was coordinated, not chaotic. As the object penetrated deeper into the inner system, the 147-second pulse intensified, evolving from a faint whisper into a firm, repeating signal perfectly aligned with the internal tremors. Radio telescopes in multiple countries recorded its precise timing with negligible variation. Natural emissions rarely achieve such exactitude. Heat, pressure, chemical reactions, or magnetic effects introduce irregularity. Yet the pulse remained locked to the 147-second cycle. Analysts noted hints of structure. Rising steps within each burst suggested prime number spacing, and subtle curves hinted at Fibonacci patterns. While inconclusive, the possibility of mathematical order within an interstellar radio signal made the shaking and pulses increasingly difficult to dismiss. Each internal tremor coincided with a pulse peak, directly linking the vibration to the signal. Even as the shaking intensified, the object's rotation remained perfectly stable, reinforcing the impression of a construct built to maintain balance under extreme internal forces. Deeper observations revealed internal layers separating. Rather than surface cracking, thin arcs appeared beneath the shell, moving outward in sync with a 147-second pulse. The separations were smooth and coordinated, unlike natural fractures, which propagate from outside inward. Brightness fluctuations echoed each tremor, showing ripples moving across the surface exactly when the pulse peaked, suggesting synchronization with the signal. Faint waves of light then began to travel across the surface during peak tremors, moving from one end to the other in step with the 147-second pulse. Initially subtle, these ripples developed into luminous bands encircling the object, tracing the internal movement repeatedly. The stable rotation allowed the waves to propagate evenly, amplifying the sense of intentional order. Avi Loeb highlighted that the combination of synchronized light, internal vibration, and radio pulses forms a trio rarely observed in nature. If chemical or pressure forces were responsible, the effect would be irregular or random. The exact timing implied an organized process releasing energy layer by layer. The shaking also influenced the dust trail. Normally, dust sheds in simple streams shaped by rotation and solar pressure. But 3I Atlas's dust bent in smooth arcs, matching the 147-second rhythm. Ripples appeared with each tremor, some bending backward briefly before returning to their original paths. The coordinated motion suggested an internal force guiding the dust. Even amid violent internal shaking, the outer rotation stayed perfectly steady, allowing the dust to form repeating patterns, sharply contrasting the interior chaos. Avi Loeb noted that such non-gravitational dust motion indicates energy release, and the precise timing suggested the dust might even carry information aligned with the electromagnetic bursts. The shaking extended into surrounding space. Observers detected faint distortions around the object, akin to flickers near charged plasma or magnetic fields. These distortions mirrored the 147-second pulse rhythm, repeating with precise timing confirmed across multiple observatories. Natural interstellar objects do not create rhythmic environmental effects without a powerful internal process. The matching distortions suggested energy release from beneath the surface. Yet the rotation remained stable, emphasizing the mystery. Some theorized the vibrations generated electromagnetic waves affecting nearby space. Others speculated a link to the WOW signal, given the shared region. The simultaneous radio pulses, environmental ripples, and internal tremors hinted at a repeating process. As 3I Atlas approached the inner system, all phenomena intensified together, building toward a climactic moment. The shaking flexed internal layers with every surge. The 147-second pulse, once a faint whisper, now arrived like a steady heartbeat. Light waves brightened in smooth, repeating arcs, the dust curled in perfect rhythm, and the surrounding space shimmered with each tremor. Yet the rotation remained flawlessly balanced. Natural objects would crack, tilt, or break under such stress. 3I Atlas stayed centered, as though designed to contain its interior forces. Observers were stunned when a particularly strong pulse triggered a global flash across the surface. The brightness rose in a perfect dome, matching the pulse, before fading, leaving the object intact. After the flash, the shaking abruptly shifted, leaving scientists questioning what would come next. After the surface flare, observers noted an unsettling new behavior. Subtle vibrations propagated outward from 3I Atlas in directions that did not correspond to its spin or trajectory. Instruments detected faint pressure waves, moving almost imperceptibly through the surrounding interplanetary medium. These waves pulsed with the same 147-second interval as the internal tremors and radio bursts, suggesting that the energy escaping the object was no longer confined to its surface or dust trail, but was radiating into space itself. The waves were weak, almost ghostly, yet consistent enough to defy any natural explanation. Analysts across multiple observatories confirmed the pattern, noting that each wavefront coincided precisely with the peak of the internal shaking and the radio pulse. Even more peculiar, the emitted waves appeared directional. Instead of dispersing uniformly, they propagated preferentially along the axis of rotation, as if guided by the object's inner structure. This implied not only stability, but intentional channeling of energy. Observers began referring to it as a radiation spine, a phenomenon where the pulses carried both light and electromagnetic energy in perfect synchronization with the internal tremors. Avi Loeb described it cautiously, stating that nothing in known astrophysics accounted for an interstellar object transmitting coherent energy with such precision while maintaining absolute rotational balance. The interior activity of 3I Atlas seemed to deepen. High-resolution brightness mapping detected a series of concentric arcs forming inside the outer shell, expanding in time with the 147-second cycle. Each arc moved outward, fading as it approached the surface before another layer emerged behind it. The effect suggested a process of staged expansion, almost mechanical, yet entirely organic in appearance. Some scientists began to hypothesize that the object's interior was compartmentalized, with energy building in nested layers that flexed and released in time sequences. This raised more questions than answers. Could an object from deep space naturally develop such an organized internal rhythm? Or were these pulses indicative of an artificial mechanism embedded within the structure, one that had survived interstellar travel intact? As the tremors intensified, the surface exhibited microfractures that were neither chaotic nor destructive. Instead, they formed a lattice of fine lines tracing geometric patterns, faint but measurable under sensitive telescopic imaging. These lines shifted minutely with each 147-second pulse, almost like a heartbeat echoing through the shell. The light ripples across the surface began to interact with these fractures, creating visual patterns reminiscent of interference waves. Each pulse created a cascading effect. Light, dust, microfractures, and energy waves all moving in lockstep. Observers described the sight as simultaneously beautiful and disquieting, a choreography of motion that defied natural explanation. Meanwhile, the object's dust trail grew more complex. Previously, the arcs of debris had followed predictable, layered curves. Now, new strands began intersecting older paths, creating braided structures that shimmered faintly in reflected light. Each braid appeared in precise rhythm with the pulses and tremors, giving the appearance of coded sequences etched into space itself. Some analysts speculated these patterns might carry information, perhaps a cosmic signature or intentional signal, though no definitive proof existed.